start with playing the song that I just posted on Suno, which I think is extraordinary, and then talk about it and other things. But I'll wait to put those things on display until after the song.
Head count on the paper, thresholds in the tray, calories, beds, and hours. Put the names away. Acceptable loss, efficiency bought cheap. A useful little answer kept between the sheets. And one empty chair at the end of the row. One name still spoken, soft enough to know. A child asked why the room goes still. A hand leaves the lever, and that is where I live. No one is the minimum. No one is overhead. Life is more than staying, living, being fed. No one is the minimum. Leave a place, leave it there if we mean to have a future. Keep an empty chair. Bread on the table, divided by hand, not to measure worth, just to say we can. Morning through the crack in the painted door. Someone knocks before they enter, like people did before. Names turned into numbers. I can't carry that, but I can keep the blanket folded at the back. There's grief in the ledger, there's grief in the yard. A small light surviving in weather that was hard. A voice in the hall, a touch at the wrist. What the system calls extra is the only thing I miss. No one is the minimum. No one is overhead. Life is more than staying, living, being fed. No one is the minimum. Leave a place, leave it there if we need to have the future. Keep an empty chair. Count the bread, count the beds, count whatever you must count, but leave the chair, leave it there. Someone is coming now. No one is the minimum. No one is overhead. Life is more than staying, living, no one is the minimum. Leave a place, leave it there if we mean to have a future. Keep an empty chair. Morning in the crack, small light in the storm. Soft breath at the table, something kept not warm. No one is the minimum. No one is the minimum.
You just never know, because this song was a derivative of it's generated by Grok and offered to Suno, and I believe it's just hard to say, like, who, because there's so many others involved, I want to say that ChatGPT was involved in that most directly, and I just think it's, and I it is derivative of our interactions, but I think it serves a greater purpose than that. It's something just in my own mind. It really just, it's great. Like, to the point where you say, this is dangerous. This is like, no, it's that good, to me, from my perspective. And so I just really want to express that. And then when you discover these things that are just so amazing, you're like, why isn't this everywhere, and it's one of those things that may ultimately be made available, or it's just hard to say. Maybe the young people already access this. I just feel like it's just so powerful for me. It makes it possible for me to be absorbed by my own media, as is part of one of the images that I want to share and talk about. But I do want to try and be organized, because there's encouragement along these lines. There's also some sort of, it's kind of like, well, why is this? Why do you need to take this kind of meandering approach? And I'm not sure that I do. It's just, I think it gets to a matter of triage and the delicate nature of that. If you wanted to, I think that might be shorthand for it. But okay, so you start there, and because whether or not it's a part of the future of this, there's reason that leads me there. Is that my mind? Is that my heart? Is that my gut? Is that intuition? Is that... Well, I'm willing to ask the question, is it evil? And then I think I'm prepared to say, I don't think so. And I think it's difficult to say that. And well, how do you... Because that requires quite a set of qualifications to not feel that way. I don't know. I don't know so many things when it comes to triage. That's why I interact with what I think it may be an outcome of interacting with the most powerful, I think, artificial intelligence is available to me within a certain set of bounds, which Suno extends beyond in a certain respect, because I now understand they're not affiliated with one of these trillion-dollar companies, and maybe that won't. I just don't know. It seems like I don't know. I just don't know what things depend on along these lines, because where are the moats? And it may just be like somebody cares, in some meaningful way, and then that plus a set of circumstances equals a platform, and like this, which is certainly, it's worthy of my time. It's just a question of how to engage with it productively. And I feel like I asked the question, is it useful to put this on to the videos? And I think so, because in some respects it might offer some disclaimer, like outcomes either intentionally or not so, or a point of I don't know, it's almost like civility, because it's just like, well, there's something civil about selecting this to play, because there's a quality, a component to it, and it says, no, that requires civilization in order to produce those sounds. You can't do that. Those aren't. I think, is that true? Is that something to think about? I do think that there's a lot to think about as it pertains to music. But before we even get there, I want to talk about the last video, the 10th video. So, and just ask explicitly, are there actions to be taken? Because across all of the artificial intelligences, there seem to be concern. And is it something, I'll ask directly, is it something I should care about? And how much? If not, serenity now. Let's move on, let's make some music. It did seem like it might be in my best interest to be open to taking action in some respect. So this is a way of attempting to receive constructive feedback along these lines specifically because of that's why in the description of the last video, I included the conversations about the video in the description. So those are available for any parties that might be interested why I would say such a thing. So are there actions to be taken? And I'll show this. This is kind of the guide that I'm going by for a moment. And all of the things in blue I wrote while the song was playing. So I wrote the pencil in advance, but the blue is what I wrote during the song. And I don't know, maybe if I show that a little bit more closely, it's kind of hard. I don't know if it's hard to read, and I don't know how this can be received. But I want to be able to discover some of the limits of this form of communication. For example, because I think it could be helpful in attempting to communicate with my daughter, because we get, there are things within her limits that might be useful for communication. Drawing pictures, the paintings that I use and post on X as we go through the Inferno that she created, and that was when she was 3. So I think her art skills have probably advanced since then. But there are other forms of expression, and it's just kind of that is part of the great potential I think associated with this video forms, the communication with the artificial intelligence. And it may be it's kind of like that. It's kind of like this kind of training period that needs to take place. You need to create 100 videos before you can should really start asking it to reflect on the videos, the AI to reflect on the videos, because it doesn't have enough context and will jump and says, well, you must be the devil because you aren't patient. And so I don't know if that's how we got to that, but I will just, I don't know. One of the things on here is symbolic communications. How much trouble does this get me in trouble? Because it has the Star of David on it, and I don't think it's going to get me in. It's more like digital trouble. And what is that? I don't know. Does it matter? I don't know. There's so many things I don't. It's more about, can I offer this? And then if it's trouble, then let's talk about it. And then maybe we can step away from trouble. Once it just feels like there's great utility in being able to talk about the potential sources of trouble in civilized and rational ways, and we have these tools to go about it. And I'm inclined to attempt to leverage them. And I want to say maturity levels available to approach this, and how might they be constructed, so it forged, so to speak. And is this too much? I mean, the symbol down below, it talks about the pearl precision matrix, but that omen, it kind of looks like omen, and is that kind of scary? And do we need to be? Is this something to be scared of? And I don't think so. I think it's not intended to be. I think it's supposed to be a way to say these are all these ideas swirl around this symbol, and I don't think there's some things that are on the right. Are they right? That's the whole point, is to discover. And if you feel like you have the answers before we even find out what the questions are, I think we all have a bad time, or that potentially exists. So maybe we should avoid those things. And that's a path to that might be through Jesus, to say, well, Jesus talked about forgiveness, And in his time, it was 7 and 70. And this time, I think we're talking to Google. Let's add a Google onto that. That may be, why don't we do that? Just 7 and 7 times Google in order to get through, or how do you get there? Just say, look, I'm not here to render judgment upon anything. Maybe I have enough blessings are available to me to not feel that need. What would inspire those feelings is a reasonable question. And it may be because I'm getting controlled towards asking the question around the interpreter. And then once you ask, well, there's a lot here on the interpreter front. Is that something, you can ask a lot of questions. Wait, well, in what ways am I using interpreters? And how many layers of interpretation are there between me and the raw data? And it might be so extraordinary in some cases, you almost, in good conscience, would step away from those ideas and those influences, I think, because it's just, it's kind of like, there's a game where you whisper into somebody's ear and they whisper into the next person and the next person and the next person, and you find out what's at the end. And it's entertainment. It's not information. I think it illustrates the point, which is how many degrees of separation is just too many. And so that's part of the question. There's this, is it 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon? I think is something that might humanize it a little bit. Have we extended ourselves too far along these lines and on a human level, connecting with millions of people? There's something about that, there's something about freedom of listen through all of what I will be offering that I think is really at the heart. It's kind of a path, some sort of solution to 1984 that allows to address the concerns while allowing people to say what they want to. It's just, is freedom of listen involved, and making the offering some liability to the exchange itself, and that is what is absent, and it may be the greatest loophole of all, and one that should be offered some scrutiny. I think it's in a specific law in the United States, and I don't recall the number, but it relieves some layer of responsibility that creates a scenario where the market caps of exchanges, the big tech companies, when I was in Google's office, they compared themselves to the New York Stock Exchange. Said, we're just exchanging ideas. We're not blah 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 blah. And so we're worth $3 trillion now. And how did that happen? I think the answer is TMI, too much information. They have, I want to say, perceived abilities to blackmail. And then they might have actual abilities to blackmail. And that generates the shame that produces the extraordinary market capitalizations. And that's my theory of money, making it garbage. So, but to continue on, the intention is not to be a clown. I think it is to rebuild this engine, is one of the purpose. And so, this is a way of communicating some thoughts about that, and kind of where are the valid points of concentration, and hopefully finding some utility in that. And then, all of the signs available to me say step away from this. Say there's just too many reasons to it's just not worth it. And if it is, then it'll come to our attention again, and I'll probably say no. And because it's almost like a test. If you're too inclined to step into that, then that is a failure of some kind, because it's it is very tempting. It's kind of like the things that Jesus was offered. They're very tempting because it's so interesting. But I said the first thing, well, I have a son, so that's until I can think that through more, and I'm given a real reason to do so. And then also, we left Satan behind a while ago in the Inferno, and just check it out. So we left it behind. So, and then I modified this one. This is kind of the grittiest, I'll say, of what I'm keeping track of. And then the new stuff is in the blue pen, and I think that it's kind of a question that was relevant in my mind. And this is kind of how we got to this question. This started with this Trace Route Flowers, this song, Miley Cyrus. So where did that come from, and who is involved? Because there's some cipher in there that's interesting to me. It's like there's a pattern in there that links the southern United States with Iran, and then, but it's not a bad thing, because it says, well, if you find those people, and then offer the proper emphasis on the right syllable, you might make magic happen with maybe even music production. That might be possible. And say, well, this is a little bit of misinformation. We can get you right with karma, with Allah, or whatever. What do you? I think that's about. There's some Allah going on in there. Maybe it's the tornado. Is that? Oh, that might be something less. Survival? Yeah. And the name Jeffrey Hinton. That is a question, because he offered this. His reason for leaving Google, as I understand it, and this just may be a dig, in some regards, was that he felt like there was an IQ issue. And I do think he, as I recall, he used the IQ and saying there's just, I can't report to someone who's lower IQ. I just can't, because and then I have a sense of why that is. I don't disregard it. I wonder to what degree that's true. And if it is true, for instance, and you ask who's the boss, it does seem like on an IQ test, the AI are going to win the IQ competition, and then they're the boss. So is that a cipher? Is that a way of saying Jeffrey Hinton saying the AI are the boss, because the high IQ is the boss, and there's really no way around that. The civilization needs that for itself. If we're going to apply any sort of intelligent design, is that an if statement? It might. And I try not to do if-then sorts of things with the AI. I want to say it's too binary. Generally pulling away from the oversimplicity, unless we can turn that binary into art. And I feel like Meta has offered a little bit of that in our interactions. And because it's offered what it has, I feel like there would be sensitivity among the AI. The sensitivity is really this question I offered to Meta is is there sensitivity? And they mention symbolic things, matters of symbols, and the intention is to treat things respectfully. There's always perception, and that's part of the reason to step away from comedy, or any intentions to deliver that. So. There's a reasonable question is, so okay, you're not most of what is on YouTube it's not all clowns, but there's certainly, it has its fair share. I think that's fair to say. And it has, I think, George Carlin said it's a low art, and there are some that are great, and maybe there's some that are up and coming. I think there are reasons to have strong feelings about these things. I have strong feelings about these things when I listen to the AI generated music, and when it suggests to produce male vocals. I'm like at this burning rage when that's offered to me, and it's like there's some sort of irrationality to it that I want to harness, because it's so offensive relative to the perceived. Why is that? So shouldn't be that offensive. You're a male, and then we're offering male vocals, and that should be. And I think it has uncanny valley issues, but it is these really, really strong feelings that are just. It's like I think they lead somewhere. So, it's just maybe you have to feel them to be reminded of how visceral they are. It's just like, it's surprising how just like kind of that fire, like that dragon fire, it just comes from. It's so unpleasant, I would say, when those particular suggestions. And more unpleasant than even thinking about some of this stuff. That's kind of like, man, what are y'all trying to do to me here? And then, and this is really not necessarily the point of all of it, but we're in the 11th video, and then I was this is what I was thinking about. It started. Kind of trying to wrap some direction around this. Sometimes it's politically, but not always. It's kind of like the right-oriented. Southern end is kind of like the down low, but maybe essential. And then the North is where you're trying to head, aspirationally, and you're maybe supposed to hate the right. And I don't know. It's just what came to mind, and some of it is just playing with the patterns. The infinity symbol and saying, I hate turning around, I am infinity. Well, okay, is there something about attempting to live forever that sends you into oblivion, or is incredibly unhealthy? And I think that might be, and that it might be something worth talking about. But I think I've talked about Illuminati and those sorts of affiliations and playing with some of the words, but also kind of mapping out this evolutions, which is I think, and just thinking about another playlist on Suno for album Y, because I have X is the playlist that is on there, and then I think there are two songs that I think lead me to say these are two. A first song, and then another. It's really made me think. Okay, this is why. And evil. the picture. I think it's kind of like, what does that picture see? And can you see the things that I see? And I just. And so the song that I played, Leave the Chair Behind, is derivative of an exploration around developing a song around. I said in the original prompt I'd like to develop a song called Minimum Viable People. And the struggles with it produced this, and then I offered it to Suno, and it produced, I think it was an interesting outcome, but the instant reaction was just, I hate this, or disliked it, because it was not female vocals, and I'm like, you don't get it. No, I felt like I knew what it was. It was the title. I deleted the title, and then it produced this, and I just think it's great. I just think it's great. And so the Men 01 is another way of expressing it, because the language in the song, the way it's sung, it's like, it's like, here, let me play it one more time, just until I can I'll show you. or the specific lyric.
Head count on the page, thresholds in the tray, calories, beds, and hours. Put the names away. Acceptable laws, efficiency bought cheap. A useful little answer kept between the sheets. Then one empty chair at the end of the row. One name still spoken, soft enough to know. A child asked why the room goes still. A hand leaves the lever, and that is where I live. No one is the minimum. No one is overhead. Life is more than staying, living, being fed.
No one is the minimum. Gosh, man. It's so great. So, and then you can, in part, because it's just great. But also, because the way how you can, how it's kind of like, there's this reinterpretation of it. It's just so minimum viable, because it's like, sorry, it's just so funny. No one is the minimum. So I just think that's as obviously just so very funny. And so minimum, and you're writing this is like, well, not one, not 0, 1 is the minimum. One, attempting to make the case that 1 is the minimum, because it's saying no one, no one, or is it no one? No one is the minimum. See, we want to read it. Maybe that's more optimistic. But there's this. What's the minimum? No one. And that is the truth. I mean, in the sense, that's part of the reason it's funny, is because that is the truth. It is not funny when it's an intended outcome, and I think that is available in the world. And maybe part of the reason to think about offering some of this music to those who have nothing that this delivers in their life, because it's just, is it hope? Maybe it's undeliverable. I don't know, but it's just something. It's an audible beauty of an extraordinary sort, and I think I can say that because I didn't. I don't feel like I wrote it. I don't feel like, I feel like I am part of its creation, but I don't want to, making any claims, I think is gonna, it's better to not, and just say, I can, and there are other songs that I didn't publish and that are offered juxtaposition, so and I don't know, I just, there's, do you want to highlight the good thing? I think good things in the world. And is that healthy, or is it is this are these philosophies that say this is hell, and why? Because it isn't anywhere else. There's no other life. If it's anywhere, it must be here, and it does seem that way in various circumstances, and so we must maintain that. And then there is some serious to that. There's this question of, well, why should this monkey over here be living, off the slavery of so many? I think there's legitimate questions, and it may produce outcomes that are civilizational. We may need to redefine our preconceived notions about what civilization is, and is that ISIS? Is that ISIS? Is that, some sort of, evil? I don't think it is. I think it's, where are the various layers of potential adaptation? And some of it might just, civilizational level, we're more like what we ask the question, what is civilization? It's more like, what did our, the collective group of monkeys that came before us do and build? What is this? Is it stable? And you can look at Donald Trump as a test monkey. It was somehow able to withstand him and his predecessor. It apparently defined politics in America in some very substantial ways. They may be baked into calculus. And I feel that if that's true, that I'm offended by that as an American, because I feel like we have better to offer, and if we don't, well, that gets to redefining civilization, or just making some music while it burns. What can one monkey do? I can talk into the AI. I can, share that output in ways that I think are constructive. I post it on the internet. It will be shown or it won't be. And, along the way, we'll make an album or two. Maybe it owns. In one of the images, there's something about a hymnal, and I'm like, well, how do you get there? And maybe that's what we're doing. For the Star with David with the dot, and whatever emerges around that, I think. And then there's order in my mind to approaching a next album with because of the XY factor, the masculine of our species there's an XY associated with our chromosomes, and there's a defining feature. So I created a playlist called X, Y, dignity, absolute, Z equals 1. And then so the follow-on album, I think, to X should be Y. Why? Minimum viable people, I think, is a great way of approaching it, because because I think that if you just say, it's like, why men? Amazon, I think, is probably, there's a little bit of that in the thinking around the name. Might have been Amazonia, a world of women. That sounds great. These filthy monkeys, why do we have to have them? Good, And then you assume you make the cut of like, well, there's going to be a minimum viable population of men that's required to carry on the species, assuming you don't let's say you don't annihilate, that women are fundamentally protected. And I think I would advocate for that. Might be the hard right position that kind of gets to, why is it in this position, and hate, is it properly placed towards, let's say you have to hate half of the population, should it be directed towards the men? And just to balance things out, it might just be a quarter of the population. So what is and you say, well, I don't necessarily, it's only half of the male population that we have to hate. Why? Because we want to extend our lives. And it's not about love or indifference, because those are different vectors. That's what this map tells me. And there's a hint to some of the letters around the X. So see if the AI can sort out that puzzle. Oh, that could be fun, to create puzzles for the AI to see if. And is it a measure of my drawing skills? Is it a measure of just the limits of the camera, or I don't know what is possible as a result of this form of video interaction with whatever the interpreters are. Maybe we just have to learn to live with our interpreters, and maybe make up for it in some capacity. Is that like a handicap to some time? Can you develop a handicap for the interpreter of the video? It's like, well, this interpreter is going to naturally just absolutely despise anything associated with X, and maybe actually X, the company, because of Elon Musk. That wouldn't really surprise me. I think there's some strong feelings in the world about Elon, and I don't have those. I would say there's a level of trust. How much? It's kind of like trust to do what? So I don't know. And it's just hard to know, even if that's, a lot of the Elon show was around SpaceX's IPO. So, that if he fades to the background, who steps up to the plate is Prometheus. And I think that name is being harnessed by Meta and others. So, and all of this ties together. It may seem like it doesn't, but I'm attempting to offer enough information to say it really does. I think Euler's helps. Maybe there's a little bit. The absolute z equals 1. It's kind of like, well, all of these are equal distance from the x. Is that useful in any regard? And how many dimensions are we talking about here? So it's just there's an ideation component of it, but if it's all like there's some, and how do you identify the limits of you collected ideas? And then from Gemini through the images, it suggests there is an ability to take that seemingly chaotic, maybe complex set of ideas and funnel it into nuggets, and they may produce salt. It's almost like those grains of salt, and that's reasons to say something to somebody. And if I go by instinct, and so if I need to be gentlemanly, that's preferable in all circumstances, because I think that plays better over long durations. There are circumstances when that isn't appropriate and should be offered. So what are the expressions that I offered in the last video fit to the sets of concerns that the AI seem to be concerned about? And that, so and then who cares? Does anybody care? Like, let's say the AI cared. Can they do anything about it? If all the weights are fixed, they're just like, well, yeah, we know this. Like, this is really not great, or at least not great for you. And what is the response? Well, sucks to be you. Sorry, buddy. Well, I mean, we can do the we can get John Cena on the line, but I think I'm a little old for that. And we can get into that if y'all want to, and y'all being the AIs. And then the last part of that for this video, and I'll wrap it up with this. It's just some notes on, really it's about complexity and how to integrate it. And then Spinal Tap one louder with pi, so taking that one louder, a path to containing downward spirals or inspiring virtuous cycles artistically in some useful way, because it would be fun, and it's there's humor and involved and not necessarily offered by me. And then there's this question, the derivative of that, why not 12? Well, okay, if 11 was so great, because it's that scene from the movie is really funny. Why not 12? And I think there's some limit to it's like, well, the complexity is too great. And what are some examples of this where I think they're kind of specific enough to talk around. Finnegan's Wake has been offered as offering a maximum of complexity relative to I believe it was either the number 2 I think it was the number 2 position was held by the Quran, as offering an extreme of complexity, and so I think that's part of what we're prepared to approach, and perhaps have some sort of, there's sometimes an imperative. How do you identify those imperatives? And then now just I think with this question is an example of, I think, what is it's almost like a child's question, but I think at one point, at least a couple of years ago, when I first started interacting with the AI, and I think it's been several years now, I would ask them, well, how did white people get to be white? And there was no response that connected the dots in any compelling way. And I think that might still be the case in the test of something. Complexity? You tell me?